There was once a creature with two brains, and thus not only had neural activity but consciousness as well, which it discovered operated optimally when it constantly focused the attention of one of the brains on the other one. The mystical is properly based on the word mystery only for as long as you don't understand what it is. And it is thus a mystery to you. Everyone is born with an original mind, and if that is the same one you die with, you did not mentally do much living. Everyone talks to themselves, but only a few ever ask, how can this be? How can this physically be? The song of the ordinary. I am what happens to me. My states are the results of events. All questions weighed by the original mind have both a positive and negative answer, and thus have no final answer. It offers no solution, only discussion. In one of the early mystical records, a more conscious man is pictured as a juggler. Left to their routine resources, men do not reflect the diverse future possibilities of human consciousness, but rather the contradictory multiplicity of their present condition. The deepest dangers of the original mind is its disposition to ramble and run incessantly and to tag along with most any passing emotion. The supernatural statuary. A god with two hands is impotent unless he favors one of them over the other. Then he's no helpless deity, simply a mortal. Rule. Everyone thinks with a limp. A grave, though common mistake, is to take your listening to talk about the mystical effort as being your effort. All engines run from the fuel within and from the air without. No less the mind of man. It is not necessary to think of the experiential payoff of the struggle in terms too mysterious and exotic, such as an enlightened or higher state of consciousness. For compared to man's normal state of consciousness, it could simply be called big state of consciousness, with the ordinary one being small state of consciousness. Or the routine state be labeled hazy consciousness, and the achieved one precise consciousness. Descriptions perhaps not very esoteric, but accurate nonetheless. It is not a matter of men living physically in shadows, but rather mentally. The mystical warrior is neither positive nor negative, but someplace in between. Everyone talks to themselves, but only a few ever learn from it. For long do most believe things more complex than actually are. A man reached the place where he stopped and pondered. Is the secret something you discover through mystical effort, or is it the discovery of the proper effort? For long are men unclear that the effort is the aim. Do note, the original mind can be educated, but not enlightened. For those of you who do still prefer your descriptions occult and mysterious, perhaps the most telling of all possible verbal comparisons is to call man's ordinary state of mental awareness local consciousness and the achieved consciousness universal. But even as otherworldly as this may sound, the reality of it is still quite earthy and everyday. The mystical warrior has no home, no nationality, and is stateless, except for the one true one. One guy pretty well figured he was approaching a significant juncture when he absolutely lost all taste for any food considered in any way healthy and good for you. Rule: the rest of the world eats with a limp. Everyone still has their original mind. Even after enlightenment, Buddha still had his pre-Buddha mind. But just because there's a knife in your pocket doesn't mean that you have to cut yourself with it. Everyone talks to themselves, but only a few ever wonder for what purpose. After concluding the course, Chemistry of the Brain, one man wanted to take up the geography of the beast. And in another history of the work, a more conscious man is shown as a tightrope walker. The ultimate sacrifice of the mystical warrior is in his giving up of surrendering to events. The experienced, knowledgeable traveler carries with him, in one pocket, a reminder, and in the other, a motivator. What more does he need? To try and explain in great detail any mystical practice is to destroy it. The speaker declared, "The whole world is stupid, only the enlightened intelligent." And a man in the crowd said, "Isn't that a bit harsh?" And the speaker replied, "Yes, I guess it is." And finally, by popular demand, one more time, direct from Red Bank, there was once a creature with two brains, and thus not only had neural activity but consciousness as well, which it discovered operated optimally when it constantly focused the attention of one of the brains on the other one. You could pick out many areas of human activity and stand in the library and look at the number of books written on the subject, and from a certain view marvel at the fact that they're all simply eating off of the books written before them, that it is all a matter of a world of invention that feeds upon itself. Criticism is necessary so that someone can criticize the criticism. It can be seen as being simply an invented world, period, including science. But if there is one area in human activity that is really sort of pathetic in this sense, it is the mystical. I could include the religious, but I was going to get more to the point. If you want to, you can include it. But to stand and to look at the number of books, and I don't mean just this year, but over the last, in the Western world, 2,500, 3,000 years, and to look at the number of books, all the way from the obscure, the ephemeral, they'll run through one printing, to those considered to be metaphysical classics, and to look at it. Did I make the point? It would be easy to look at the world of literary criticism, the world of fiction itself, and to think, my God, and to look at thousands, if not millions of books, and think, well, it's all bullshit, and they just keep piling it on top and on top and on top. But the mystical is even worse. Not only, but the number of books. And here it is, the last count, I have now contributed over 1,500 hour-long tapes of me standing here talking about it. Videotapes. Before we started that, I don't even know how many hours people got on tape and not on tape that I talked. Thousands and thousands of pages that I wrote. According to how sharp a listener would be, it can all come down to one word. And the idea that it's all mysterious. The idea that it must be continually talked about. The accepted practice of people seeking out great spiritual teachers, especially in the plural, to go study with one, then go study with another, to try and maybe flesh in from the second enlightened master that which perhaps the first one didn't know or forgot about. Or even the word that I've started using again for the last some months, the mystical, tied to the idea of the mysterious. There's hardly anything less mysterious. There is a certain aspect of it that I was going to head, besides the people who now may sort of be following these video showings in other places that just find it interesting and it's kind of a pastime. But anyone who takes this seriously, I want to point out that there's an aspect that has never been made known public. For those of you that enjoy gossip, I could even say that I'm not sure anyone in the past ever understood it this way. They understood it very sufficiently to practice it. But there's an aspect of it that is so earthy, that is so physical, that I may be blowing smoke up your skirt, but I know people enjoy shit like this for me to say. I'm not even sure that anybody in the past actually ever took it as far as something I know. And I want to tell you that I'm not ever going to tell anybody. But I want to tell you that. I want to tell you that there is something, no matter what you think that you've gotten out of either me or somewhere else, that if the writings in the past, anybody, any era that you want that really affected you and you thought that you really received something of a specific nature, not just the talking of the ideas, but what appeared to be descriptions of how man could actually affect himself or the specific directions for some practice. Even those that apparently get it down to a very fine point. There's a finer point than you ever heard of. And my plan is not to ever tell anybody. And you're certainly not ever going to find it anywhere else. It's not out in print, and it's not repeated. That's why I thought you might like the little either real or faux titillization, for those of you who like the word, of me hinting or pretending that I'm not even sure anybody ever really took it this far. But I tell you that I'm not going to tell you for a reason also. And those of you who are really good, even though you might not like the idea, you'd probably like to punch me in the nose. I know if our positions reversed, I would have wanted to strangle somebody if it gotten to the point that I really assumed that they knew almost everything I wanted to know. And if they said, yeah, and there's one thing that I'm not ever going to tell you, I might have smiled. You know. Especially if I didn't have anywhere else to go and they were kind of my last chance. But I sure would want to strangle them and think, well, that's about the damn dirtiest trick I ever heard. Yeah, but it's not. Which those of you that like the inferred gossip I was giving, that when I said I'm not even sure that anybody in the past, even apparently the The figures you've heard of is who I'm inferring, that I'm not even sure that they understood it. Other than any part of your old mind that likes that sort of pretend gossip, there's also this aspect. If they did, then you would also be well to suspect that they played the same game I am or took the same approach that I am, as that's why you never heard about it, because they never told anybody. At any rate, I'm telling you this now because the last time we taped, which would have been March the 6th, 1996, I came about as close, and I did it again tonight. I came about as close as I'm ever going to come to pointing it out. And it's not anything to go find out anywhere. It's in you, and it's not in an obscure place. It's not in your non-findable, non-locatable soul. It's not in the divine spark of godlike consciousness, or whatever other metaphysical term you may have heard. It is very specific. It's very local. It's in an exact area. And I'll give you a hint. It's above the waist. But about as specific a description of what this is all about that you ever will run across publicly is no great secret. I've attempted to narrow down the scope for you and to distill it all. It's all within the method itself could be just distilled into the words of controlled attention. It doesn't sound very mysterious, but the descriptions are there. There's always been known, and you can talk forever. You've got look at all the literature that, if he existed, which supposedly the life of Jesus put out. Look at all the literature, even more so, that Buddha churned out. Not him, but the business that followed him afterwards. All the commentaries on the Quran. And as far as their being in the religions, in the so-called founders, as far as them actually being involved with true mysticism, that they were not there to form a new religion, they were not there to do good work, they were not there to be charitable. They were there on this planet, or they were here, and they had one desire, not to save humanity. They wanted to be personally more conscious. That was the only thing they had in mind. That's the only thing they wanted. Everything else is bullshit. They knew it. If they came back, they know it. There's nothing else to be said once you understand what it was about. No one is born knowing what it's about, evidently. It takes everybody a while. And if you're interested, you can read that in the stories without them understanding why they repeat it. But the histories of all the religions have got some story about the founder, gets all interested in exotic matters, then he gets confused, nobody can tell him what it is. His peers, the ruling priestly class of his time and place, they can't tell him. Then he wanders off, and then he comes back, and he's no longer in doubt. He wanders off by himself, always notice. They never teach him that at the temple. They never teach him at the local church. He asks, he gives them a chance, and then he wanders off. And he disappears for a time, and he comes back. And he knows what it is. After that, they could have told you, if you had been there, not part of a crowd, what they then understood once they realized what this is about. And they were after their own ends, always. Once they understood what it was about, they could have told you, if they thought you could have heard, they could have told you in anywhere from 1 to 5 words, according to how verbose they were. They could have told you. And once a man knows after that, it is almost heartbreaking. It is so simple. It is so simple, except everything in life is arranged to keep you from remembering to do it. That's the easy way to put it. That is the way that is most commonly written about, that once it's put into some sort of words, and you've had them hanging around all the way from, if you know how to read it, from writings in the Old Testament, certainly Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad. Buddha is just full of it. But of them in the Vedic scriptures, not to leave them out, the oldest of them all, it is just nothing but story after story about people attempting to remember something, attempting to focus their attention, and then after that, to pacify the ordinary mind, keep the children reading, no matter their age. It always then has an object to it. It says that so-and-so went out, struggled for many years, traced down the gods, meditated, fasted, to understand the mystery of life, and then it struck him what it was, and he understood that the purpose now is to forever, with each and every breath, remember, and then you turn the page and it'll say the name of God. It'll say something. That is superfluous bullshit. It is to satisfy people. It's to give people something to think about. Because you just say, if Buddha just said, now I understand, the purpose of life is to remember. Even the original 5, the stolid little monks, went, yes. And then he realized, of course he knew it anyway, he had to go, to remember that life is an illusion. And I went, oh, okay. But if he'd said, remember, or if Muhammad had come back and said, the voice of Allah, a higher state of consciousness, spoke to him and said, read, which that is, be conscious in a certain way, and he said, I'm illiterate. And the angel said, read. And he said, I can't read. You know I'm illiterate. Translate all that. And forget about being actually literate. And he said, oh, okay. That's the story he told them. And they went, well, and then he had to make up something. The same that Buddha said, now I know the secret. Him and his 5 monks, they'd all traveled together, and they said, now you know it, don't you? Yep. He said, what is it? He said, well, the secret is you've got to remember. And he realized, they were all waiting, yes? Oh, you've got to remember that life appears to be suffering but it's an illusion. Or Muhammad said, I finally got the secret. The secret spoke to me. And it said, read, remember. And I said, well, I can't do it. And they said, come on, remember. And he went, okay. Except he put it read. But there he was talking. All his in-laws, what was going to be the beginnings of the Islamic Roman Catholic Church. The brothers there at the bench. Yes. Well, he told me to read. Yes. And so I did. And then he realized they're waiting to hear what? It's all bullshit after that. And once that starts, then you've got schools and universities to teach religion. You have thousands, if not millions, of books explaining Islam, explaining Buddhism. And new ones out every day. There's one word. Is remember, read. The pitiful part is, after that, using poetic license to say pitiful, the problem after that is, how does a man make himself do it? How can you keep it up all the time? Now, I'm not talking about the actual, what is enlightenment, those moments of satori and all of this, which is it is something else. That is not the effort. And I can assure you, those of you that have not had a taste of it, it is incomparable. Everything you ever imagine, anything you want to read is an understatement. But that is not the effort. That is not what appears to be, or not what a man is faced with, because there is no way to specifically produce that. That's not an absolute statement. There are things you can do that's more conducive, The more you've had it, the more it occurs, which all of that's of no help. That's to say, well, once it's happened to you once or twice, and it seems to happen more. And if it's never happened to you once or twice, who cares? You still won't strangle whoever tells you that. Like, well, what the hell good does that do me? You know? That's a lot of information. I really feel better, I know. But I'm not about to start in any way trying to explain the state itself. But I'm sure you surmise that in some way it's connected with the effort. It's just there is no direct way to guarantee it, and no one has ever been able to just produce it at will. But it is tied, it is the same thing that I am inferring, or the same thing I'm telling you I'm going to tell you about, that is what the effort is, and it's where, how, it's what's involved with the state itself. It's very non-otherworldly, it's very local, and very specific. People are aware of it. Not the state, but people are aware of what, let's forget the state for a minute so that I don't try to drag your attention in two different ways, or you think it's being dragged in two different ways mistakenly. Forget the actual state of being more conscious to the point that it's, people want to put another word on it, which is justifiable, to call it enlightenment. That just swallows up, it just makes your ordinary state. You're still conscious, you're not floating around, it's not an out-of-the-body experience. Your eyes do not roll back in your head and you pass out. No. But let's set that aside for a second. It is the effort. It is that which drags a few people, whoever they are, into pursuing such as this. Assume that you're one of them. We'll say you generically. No one converted you to it. No one talked you into it. No one recruited you on a street corner. It cannot be done. And the easiest way to say there's no explaining it, there is some, but I'm not going to explain it to you. It just is. Some people are born with red hair and some with black hair. Some people are interested in this and some are not. What you want. But once someone's interested in it, and they find, and they stick with it enough, no way to guarantee it again, but they stick with it enough, there have been right out in the open descriptions of what it was for thousands of years of the effort itself, which people can taste, they can experience, it makes sense, not theoretically. People know they can experience it on a small level. A common one that I've referred to before, 2,500 years ago, in Plato, that's the first written record that most people have heard of. He even said it was an older myth. Of course, as sharp as he was, he could be playing my games. Every time he says there's an old myth, just like me, he makes them up. But at any rate, he said that it was a myth that was there before he got there, before his time. Simply that men are born underground. They're born in a cave with a small campfire. And they live out their days, and all they see is their shadows on the wall. Which you can look at, you can do it yourself at home, get between you and the light, and you can see your shadow. You can do hand gestures, you can make speeches, you can make prayerful things. You see people make love, you see people stab one another. And that's all they knew. And the myth, according to Plato, is that one guy, some way, stumbled, got outside, got up to the surface of the planet, walked out for the first time into the sunlight. Imagine. Because you can imagine this. It's not something that takes any great intellect, that you can imagine living underground, born underground, you and everyone else. And you've got the ability to see, but the only thing to be seen are shadows. That there's only enough light down there. It's just a small campfire, you've got to imagine. Over here, enough to light up, back then, whatever it was, 4 billion people, 2 billion people, just that much, and it just shows shadows up there. And you've got nothing else to compare it to. You can understand that. You can sit at home and do it. And then to understand, comparably speaking, for someone to get outside, to make it to the surface of the planet and walk out in the sunlight, and then he rushed back, went down there, and told them about it. And we can all, without knowing any more of the story, you can all figure what everyone's reaction was. Made no sense. They couldn't understand it. The more he insisted, the only conclusion they could come to was that he lost his mind. But the story, the picturization is first class, because at any moment, those people who are wired up to do it, and as I said, ordinary people, you can get them to do it. It doesn't amount to anything. But right this second, you can momentarily, what it amounts to, I can describe it all sorts of ways, is momentarily you try to stop the internal flow, the internal talk. You simply try to be conscious of the fact that you're conscious. And it is as though you moved in momentarily to a brighter world. Because everyone understands the nature of sight. And you know that there's a central field of focus. Us and all other binocular visioned animals that use depth as part of their orientation, their way to survive. But you know that, let's say you're looking right at me. You can do it with television, do it with anything. Of course, those of you that are really getting smart, you know that you can do it internally. You stare. But right now, not just staring. I don't mean that you're in some subnormal state, but you're watching me, and I'm talking. And you're also aware of peripheral vision, part of the protective mechanism to survive. The deer can be staying out in the field, and it can see a lion creeping toward it, but suddenly there's a motion over here that's not really in its direct focus field of sight, but if it's still got to watch this, but suddenly something moves over here, and you can be aware of it. Sitting there right now, if you're really watching me intently, you're aware of somebody sitting next to you. You can't really right this second, if you keep looking at me without moving your eyes, you might not be able to tell me what color shirt the person has next to you, or whether they got a new pair of glasses, but you're aware of it there. A comparable that a person can experience, there is no theory involved, is that once you put your hand on it, once you see what it is, you can momentarily almost step into a brighter world. This is almost just momentarily that you came out from underground. Even though you're looking at me, if you stop and just try to be conscious of your own consciousness, of your own awareness, not only you're watching of me or whoever it is you're looking, but your sight doesn't necessarily get any better right out there. Your peripheral vision still is not as exact as your central field of focus. But right this second, anybody that wants to can go. And the whole thing brightens up a little bit. Everything you're seeing, in fact, binocular vision, depth, the field of depth seems to take on some sort of new dynamic. It's just that right that second, it's as though everything stopped and the colors get just a little brighter, the outlines get a little brighter. The whole thing becomes clearer. It is as though, from the myth related to Plato, that there is another world that men do not, in which men do not normally live. Another world that's on the surface that is brighter, clearer, and everything is more in focus. After that, you can go into great dithers and dreams of metaphorical wallowing to say, yes, everything becomes clearer. It is as though you stepped out from underground, but it's not just clear in sight. That's not the purpose of all this, as you know. It's internal sight. That suddenly things, the very same things that you see every day, and now see you need to take into a metaphorical realm that we're talking now about conscious vision, or the vision of consciousness, not just physical sight. It's the things that you see every day, there is something else there. And you don't have to worry about, as children do, that is ordinary wizards and priests and metaphysicians. It's not that there's spirits lurking, some sort of metaphysical auras around people. It's the same things you normally see, except there's a lot more going on than you realize. The things that are announced the things as they proclaim themselves to be. Several nights ago, I was trying to drag your attention in a specific area or an example having to do with religion. That there are things that life holds out, or that things that seem to speak for themselves. Things come out and say, yes, we're science, or yes, we're religion, or yes, here is one aspect of humanity, and here's what we have to say. And they say it, and as all things, the effect, if it has on X number of people, on half of them it has a negative effect and half a positive effect. That is, there is no conclusive statement. There is no conclusive perception by people of the validity of what the thing presents itself to be. That is, it's always open to discussion. It is always in some doubt to at least half the people that if a thing steps out and says, I am civilization, half the people will go, no, it's not. If one thing says, I am progress, or we are progress, this is progress, half the people will go, I knew it, I was going to say that, and half the people go, no, it's not. No one at the ordinary level questions that. And what I'm trying to get you to consider is everything that steps forward, everything that comes to the attention of man, everything that passes through a man's consciousness, presents itself as one thing. But there's something else. It doesn't mean that it's not true. It's that, but it's something else also. That is not the end of it. What you're seeing amounts to a shadow play. What you're seeing is a hazy, imprecise representation of whatever it is. And I don't mean that the thing itself is hiding some esoteric secret, that if you suddenly could rearrange your awareness and see religion and go, so that's the secret. No. It's just that the imprecision, the uncertainty as to what it is removed. I don't mean that there's some great secret specifically in one or any other area in human life. But it's all the uncertainty, all of the doubt, all of the questions people have as to, well, exactly what's the purpose of this, or what does that mean? It's all gone. All you got to do is see it in the sunshine. All you got to do is be able to see it without the fuzzy, without the hazy outlines that your mind normally accepts as being the depiction of whatever it is. That you look at other people, you look at ideas such as religion, politics, whatever it is, you look at them and you think you know what it is. And your mind does know what things are to the extent that it operates, to the extent that the ordinary world continues. But what a few people can never settle for, and for a long time they never know what it is driving them, is they simply cannot settle for the uncertainty. They cannot settle for the haziness. They will normally, if they continue this, they normally then fall into the acceptance of some notion, of some discipline, either meditation or prayer. And I have attempted to make you see that they are all the same thing. They do not appear to be. And people who believe that prayer, that there is Christian prayer or Buddhist prayer, or people believe that there are forms of Zen meditation or Sufi meditation, if that's all they can see, then that's all they can see. But they are still seeing imprecise, hazy images of it. I'm not saying they're wrong, you understand. They're just seeing this much when there's this much. What they're seeing is there, but it's a shadow of it. They're seeing a piece of it. They're not seeing the whole thing. It's that, but it's nothing. Just by seeing that piece, anytime that you are uncertain, anytime that you can see it, that is any idea that you think about, and there is a pro and a con, that you can weigh it positively and you can weigh it negatively. That you can go, well, it could be true, but then again I can see it this way. Then you can rest assured that you're still underground. You're still seeing the shadows of it. Because once you see something, there's no question about it. There's no doubt about it, whatever it is. But what I was trying to get you to consider was that they all come down to one thing. That you're trying to focus your attention. You're trying to hold something inside mental awareness to stabilize it. Every symbol, every icon, every prayer, every form of meditation is all the same thing. Rosary beads, making mystical signs, spiritual exercises. Is there anything I'm leaving out? Sitting, standing, staring. It is all the attempt. Once you understand it, it's all, no matter who it was, no matter where it was, it's the attempt for a man to take a piece of his awareness and to hold it on one place, on one thing. I hate to say one thing, as you notice, because that you have to say that because it'd be like, I'll go back for those of you that have any doubt, it'd be like Buddha. They said, you got the secret, right? And he went, yep, okay, you got me. They said, what is it? And he said, well, it's you've got to focus. And they went, yeah. And then he realized and went, oh, on one thing. No, oh. Every time you finish that sentence, you're slightly misleading people. And yet, what are you going to say? Probably, it's of no great importance, but I guess most people's exposure in the last 20 or 30 years came indirectly in the Western world, in Europe, especially the United States, was from the idea that got translated into several languages by one guy in particular, and it ended up called remembering yourself. And many people who were originally wired up for this, it's the sort of thing, and it was being said 3,000 years ago, but it's the very thing they hear it the first time in English. Maybe just hear the term or they hear a 2-minute discussion of it, description, they go, ah, that's it. You can then be stuck with that as a hobby for the rest of your life. And it can then be talked about. It can be written about. For as long as you'll listen, saying you generically again, that someone goes, that's it. Or maybe you did run across, if you understood it, to be a Buddha mind, the unity of Zen consciousness. There have been descriptions around forever, but at any rate you may hear it and you go, yes, that's it. Tell me more. That was it. But the mind says, tell me more. And you can sit and listen or read the rest of your life on that basis, and not with an incorrect beginning, that is, that you believe that this is the way, this is the path, this is the trick, if I could do that. But see, once you give a specific method, then it's open to negative and positive descriptions, and you're normally left, by and large, if you want to hear commentaries for the rest of your life, or you want to hear commentaries until you can continually remember yourself, let's say. We'll use that term. You go, yes, I hear what you're saying the first time you hear it. You go, that's it. All right. How can I do it? How can I do it all the time? You then are open for, if you live another 50 years worth of what amounts to negative commentaries on it, by pointing out, and I say negative commentaries, you understand it's on the basis of things you should not do, the things that are not remembering yourself, which is, of course, the same trap as almost all parts of human civilization, but especially those that seem to be based upon the attempt for a person to undergo a change. Religion, again, being the great one, education's one, but religion just the widest. It has to be presented on the basis of the negative aspects. That if you heard it described that a man would be much better off, a man would live a completely different life if he were a true Muslim, if he were a true servant of God. That is, if he served higher forces instead of living a mundane life and just living by instinct, just living by the whim of the flesh, as much fun as it can be. If that doesn't satisfy you, then you've got to understand that what you're actually attempting to do according to where you were living at the time. They'd say what you're actually wanting to do is be a true believer. You're wanting to be a real Muslim. And you go, yes, I believe, I hear you. Okay, I do want to be. How do I do it? You're then left with a lifetime almost of nothing but negative descriptions of it, because they tell you all the things that you cannot do. And you say, well, all right, but if you got real sharp, which hardly anybody ever gets this sharp, check with yourself, that they go, wait a minute, I've been reading, I've been listening, and even thinking, you can't blame it on anybody else, for X number of years on what would be to be more conscious, to be a mystic, to be a Sufi, to be a Zen Buddhist. And all I have piled up, and even those are redundant, you don't notice, but you think, if you look at huge structure in my mind of all the things that constitute not being more awake, not being a Christian, all the things that you cannot do and remember yourself. And the original question was, though, when you first heard it, when you were 17, was, how do I remember myself? How do I become more awake? How can I reach enlightenment? Very few people ever get to the point that it absolutely strikes them. Like a well-placed sledgehammer to the forehead, that I have spent all these years entangled with all the things not to do, when the original question was how to do it. And there's a reason. It's not because of a conspiracy. It's because how to do it can be put in like one word, and that was it. And people go, no. Yeah, I know, I hear what you're saying, but let's be reasonable. How can I get going with this? Okay, well, here we go. You can't drink, you can't stay up at night, and you can't ever travel to Belgium, whatever you do. Don't wear green socks. And you go on and on and on. Don't ever be negative. Don't criticize other people's religion. Wait a minute, let me write it down. The first thing you know, 40 or 50 years old, and you got a book like this, but it seems like you're getting somewhere. It's more and more things that you can't do. You can't be critical of people. You can't hold your parents responsible for what happened to you. You can't get all involved with the external world of politics. And you just page after page after page, when the original question was how to do it, not what to do, what not to do. That's why I say it's sort of pitiful, all of the commentaries, mine not excluded, because you end up, if you tell people exactly what it is, I mean, you can tell them, and they say, yes, whatever it was is what I'm saying. You didn't have to hear it from me, is that you could have found something years ago and been convinced that that's it. That's surely the way to it. Okay, let's see, how do I do it? And almost before you know it, to be charitable, almost before you know it, you're completely off that path, and you're in the ditch. You're in the wide road of all the things that you cannot do and still hope to accomplish this. It is pathetically simple to do, and it is not mysterious. It is not spiritual in the sense that people ordinarily think of it. It has nothing to do with activity in the ordinary sense. It is not a form of behavior. It is not something in another world. It is not something in a future lifetime, which, I guess according to how good you are, either makes it worse or better, because you understand all of that keeps it at arm's length. It keeps a dream going. It can, to use psychological kinds of descriptions, can make a man tolerate life because he believes. He can believe that truthfully he is involved in some great struggle because he is continually compiling new observations of himself, continually adding to his list of things you cannot do. You simply cannot expect to be more conscious, to be a mystical warrior, to ever reach Buddhahood, to reach a state of enlightenment. And you just suddenly come up with a new one. You hear somebody say, a man shouldn't do so-and-so. And you think, I should have known. That was obvious as hell. Where's my book? And you add it. And apparently you're getting somewhere. And all the public mystical literature is also something else that people do not notice. That's right there in front of you. That these so-called great prophets and the public figures, again, let all kinds of stuff out. Except the thing I told you about that maybe they didn't even know. But they let all sorts of things out. And the main one they let out, that should be of some interest to some of you by now, is the main thing that I'm pointing to tonight, is how irritated they point it out in sort of they'll do it parabolically, they'll do it behind jokes, they'll do it behind satire. About how hard it is to do the most simple of things. It's all full of it. All these great founders of worldwide religions. It's just full of them, saying it right there in front of you. After they've talked supposedly for a lifetime of them saying, it's a shame, it's a shame. And people think, what? You know, stick it to us. And they're not saying what a shame it is about somebody else. They're saying what a shame it is that I'm still as dumb, stupid, forgetful, which is just another way of saying that my states are still tied to the world of events to such a degree that I forget they don't have to be. What was that? Don't mean to run it in the ground, but I don't think anybody, I'm going to try one more time, even got the one I used for a couple of, there's all sorts of possible stories behind it. Just the one I picked out, the easy version of history of Jesus on the cross and hollering, oh my God, you know, how did I screw things up? Of course, like you said, well, you know, my Father, you know, God, why have thou forsaken me, and then died. I'll try one more time. If there he was, and you got to do it all sorts of ways, whether it actually happened, whether it didn't happen, but assume there he is, nailed up on a cross, and he's dying, and he looked down, and there was, if it had been Muhammad, there was Abu, or if it had been Buddha, there was the 5 original monks. You know, whoever it was. He looked down, and some of his close friends, they'd all been through it together, been hanging around. And he saw that they were there. Then he might have looked up and went, oh my God, boy, did I fuck it up. Oh, gee. But knowing that they were right there and saw him, because it would have been a piece of theater, and then he would have looked down to make sure that he would have winked, you know. Because what he would have been doing was playing out the satire of, oh, the world of events got me. You know, my state of consciousness. You know, only someone whose state of consciousness was back to normal would look up in the heavens just because they're dying and up here bleeding to death and nails through their wrists. Just because of that, only an ordinary person would go, damn, this hurts. Or, you know, what'd I ever do to life? What'd I do to these Romans and my fellow Jews to them do this to me? That's what he's saying. That's one translation of it. But then he would only done it if he'd had a few, at least 2 or 3 of his close friends there that was actually other would-be mystic, so that when he went, oh, that he could look down and realize that they went, oh, you know, we know what you're doing. He went, okay. But it was satire, very specialized, personalized satire. But it does represent that, and as I said, stories throughout all the other cultures and religions and outside religions, of what appears to be either an unfortunate death, an untimely death, an undeserved death, or else a life of extreme hardship and not being appreciated, which all represents one thing. These men, if it had not have happened, and I'm really playing with it now, I don't mean I'm fooling you, but I'm having to stretch it so many ways that you should be able to stretch it yourself and put it back together. If their life had not been filled with crucifixions, and all that other bullshit that happens to everybody, they would have made it up. And when they were dying, they told the people, look, if you guys are going to make a living off this, if there are enough people around that find this of interest in you, since you guys are going to outlive me, and you're going to talk about it, make things sound more complicated than they were. That is a fact. But now jump from the history of either real or fictitious people into what I'm saying now. Forget that the life of a Jesus or Muhammad is intriguing, is complex, is trying, and all these tribulations, these challenges. You know, I even fall into it and talk about the mystical warfare and the out on the great adventure. Several nights ago, I made you up a news item that said one man had begun to decide that mystics actually had no formative years. You know, everybody else, you start reading a history of, you know, everybody from a Beethoven to a Picasso to a Goethe, they will talk about, they'll go into this history and they'll always find, don't ask me how, they'll always find turning points. They'll find crucial moments. They'll find, you know, how his father died at an early age. And if his father didn't die, his mother died. And if neither one of them died, he wanted him to die. Or they threatened to die. But they will find things and they'll talk about the kind of cauldron that bubbled and all the forces in his immediate family and in his immediate environment, in his nation, the times themselves, the Middle Ages, the early 1600s, the way it helped form a Dante, someone with that kind of view. And this one guy said that he'd come to the conclusion that mystics had no formative years, which is a fact. It's part of the genetic wiring system of life. There's no formation. All these things about Jesus wandering off and disappearing, the lost years of Jesus. He goes into the temple and asks them what's going on. Nobody knows, and they get real mad and send him home to his mother and say, keep this kid away from us. And I think according to the Bible, he was like 12. Then you turn the page, your next chapter, and suddenly he's 33 years old and he's back, really raising hell. And now there's people made livings and written books, the lost years. And of course, Buddha, there's a version of that, and Muhammad, Buddha just wanders off that, by God, he can't find an answer, and he just takes another approach. Well, there seems to be a more memorable approach that he sits under a tree, like, I'm going to hold my breath until I find out what it is. Jesus just wanders off and disappears because they don't history don't know what to make of it. There is no explaining. Then they have to say, well, now we know how he knew that. He wasn't actually human. Ha ha. Or how did Muhammad, a guy that was illiterate, a camel dealer, suddenly come back and one day he starts talking like this? And so they all have to come up with a story. Either the people involved, the Muhammads and the Jesuses, play along with it, or history says, God talked to him, an angel appeared to him. Or he wandered off and found some secret group of people out in the desert who were in touch with God, and they taught him. The point was, there's no formative years. The point is, there's no way to explain it. Because the point is, it's in you. It's in people like that. I guess we're out of tape? Okay. Well, end it off. Is it off?